Why can't we be friends? Why can't we be friends? Hello and welcome to the next episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies with special guest Tim Davis. This is the podcast where all three of us went and saw a movie at our local Regal Cinema Theater, and now we're going to talk about it in Matt's Honda Pilot in the parking structure right next to the theater. And we're going to talk about such things as should you see this movie, should you not see this movie, should you wait for streaming, should you bring your family, should you bring a date, should you go by yourself, should you snack, should you cry, should you experience all your emotions, should you go in emotionless? I don't know. We're going to talk about all these things, maybe only some of them, maybe none of them at all. I am Todd Domer.
And I'm Matt Malloy, and yes, we're here again. We saw a movie. Todd, I have to admit, I was really hoping for some Guns N' Roses.
I was thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, next time there's a movie called Civil War, which is the name of the movie that we saw.
Yeah, but in my mind, I could not think of the Civil War lyrics at all, and I was like, I don't feel like looking it up today.
That's fair.
So I went with Why Can't We Be Friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you have it. So, we saw a movie. It's called Civil War, and I'll tell you what it's about. But first, let's hear who we might know in this movie. Tim?
Well, I would say there's only two named actors that are well known. Kirsten Dunst is the lead. She's a war journalist who's seen it, been there, and is covering this civil war that's happening in America in this movie's version. She's been in a ton of things over the years, probably most famously Mary Jane in the Spider-Man movies with Tobey Maguire. But she's been, started way back with Interview with the Vampire and Jumanji back in the day, and that's definitely a household name. And then we also have, as the president in this movie, Nick Offerman, mostly known for his role on Parks and Recreation, but he's also been in a lot of other TV shows and movies over the years. But I'd say that's it for household name.
I would like to highlight Jesse Plemons.
Oh yeah,
Texas
a
Forever.
very memorable role yes, pretty much the selling point of the trailer.
Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. So we got if I would say it's a fairly small cast.
Yeah.
Despite the scope of it.
Right. So what is this movie about? Well, the movie is set in some state of the United States of America where there are America has torn itself apart. There's a group called the Western Alliance. Western Forces, thank you. And they are a military force pushing towards Washington, D.C. There's also a Florida Alliance that's pushing towards Washington, D.C. to try and kind of end the United States as we know it. So that's really the backdrop of this. And what we have is we have four journalists who set out from New York City in this environment, and their goal is to reach Washington, D.C., and their hope is that they're going to interview the President of the United States before he's kind of overthrown and killed. So we follow them on their journey. Their road system has broken down a little bit, so they take kind of a circuitous route through Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and finally they do make it to D.C. And we get to see what happens. So that's kind of all I'm going to share about the plot of the movie. And let's get right into our gut reactions, if they're civil or not. Todd, what's your gut reaction to Civil War?
Well, I have to admit that I was not excited to see this movie. I want to put that into the universe first, only because it hits a little too close to home, in my opinion, of like
The marketing does too.
all the things that are happening in the U.S. today and all the division we're feeling right now and seeing. So I was like, I don't know.
Squeamish.
But I would say, and this is not going to equal me saying I like the movie, because I think I'm going to land on I don't. But, and the reasons for me, I think, coming out not liking the movie are not exactly just from a movie standpoint, but it's almost like if you're going to do this subject and you're going to do a movie about this, I feel like they could have done a lot more. Like this, I felt was a stripped bare story like where you don't get a whole lot of information at all. You are thrusted into this like this adventure for these 4 journalists who are trying to kind of get to the ending point of what this war is, to basically interview the president, to ask him questions basically like, why did you let all this happen and stuff like that, kind of. And I kind of felt like you could have gone in different directions. You could have gone, journalistic integrity, like teaching lessons about that. You could have gone even somewhat more like patriotic, like we got to stand together, or like there could have been different avenues for this movie to do something. And all it is like a straightforward mess, in my opinion. Like, you're not given much information about exactly how we got here. You're not given much information about what ways we could do to prevent getting to here. And then, in a weird sense, like, it almost gets to a weird paint by numbers. Like, as soon as you start the movie, you can craft in your mind how this movie's going to go. Like, they set it up where, and even from the get-go, the characters you're introduced to are so paint by numbers. You have the main character, who's the gritty, been in it for a long time, almost devoid of emotion, Kirsten Dunst. You have the guy that she's with. You never really understand their relationship. He's an adrenaline junkie. Like, you get the sense that maybe there's some, he likes to be a journalist, but also he just makes dumb remarks about how war gets him like excited and stuff like that. Then you have the rookie, who, of course, Kirsten Dunst sees herself in and stuff like that. Then you have the very old veteran, who is very much painted as like, this is my last hurrah kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like for something that could have been interesting and more original, they played it incredibly safe in some areas with their story. Like, and that kind of bothered me. Like you got me to the theater to see this movie, even though I really didn't want to. And instead of going, wherever you could that's interesting to me, you made it as simplistic and paint by numbers as possible as it could get to. Like, and that honestly bothered me. I didn't think the acting was like stellar. I've never thought Kirsten Dunst is a very good actress, and that to me carried very hard in this movie, because so much of this movie is her portraying like emotionless, but it almost at times just comes off like she has no talent. Like, sometimes I was like, maybe you're hitting this pretty well, and then other times I'm like, I'm not buying this at all. Like, and then the guy who she's with, his character is just all over the place. His acting is also way over the top at times, and then reserved at times. He was all over the place, and I really, it's a straightforward movie. Like, it's not super long, which I appreciated. Probably like a little under 2 hours. It is a very like, they're all kind of like, it slows down at times, but it is kind of like a go. Like, at no point was I looking at my watch like, okay, let's wrap this up, or how long is this, or whatever. But I don't know. It never really grabbed me. And by the time it was over, I was like, all right, I want to go to the bathroom now. Like, I just really never, if we're going to do a movie where like maybe we're showing where America could go or something like that, let's teach some lessons along the way. Let's do something with it. And this one just wanted, to me, it could be completely off, it just wanted to capitalize on the way things are right now. It was like, let's make a hot button topic movie about, where we could see America going with all the turmoil it's in right now. But we're not going to like attach anything to it. It's just going to capitalize on everyone's fears right now and show the worst it could possibly be, kind of. Like, so I don't know. I wasn't here for it. I don't think it's really good. I think if you were reserved about it all, then don't see it. Like, nothing comes out, like, I don't come out of this movie going, oh man, I want to tell the story of this movie. I want people to go see it. Like, it's certainly not the worst movie I've ever seen. Like, it's not even that bad. I just was like, like, who cares? Like, and I know sometimes that's worse than it being good or bad. Like, it's just straight who cares. Man, there's some commotion going on loud conversations between people
Probably
out there.
more interesting.
Settle down. We're in a podcast here. So I don't know. I wasn't for it. I don't really recommend it. Nothing grabbed me about this movie to say you have to see it. I'm interested to see what the journalist in the car thinks as a person who's an ex-journalist. I just, it also, I mean, like, and maybe, I just don't know. It didn't paint journalism and journalists and photographers, war photographers, it didn't paint them in a good light, in my opinion. And I don't know if that's like, you have to be a certain type of person to want to do that. But I just don't feel like they were really painted in a good light. And I've always, like, not that I've ever wanted to be a war journalist or anything like that, but I've always respected people who felt like they had to present what was going on, whether or not you liked it or didn't. No story behind it. They just wanted to present what was going on because people need to see it. And I don't know. I just really felt like it fell flat on all those fronts that it could have been a good message to something. Like it didn't take a stance in any kind of way. It just was there. And that's probably going to just totally reflect in my rating. It's not going to be a horrible rating, but it was just there. Like I just saw a movie. Sure, it was a movie. Like, so am I excited about it? No. Do I recommend it? Not really. I don't think there's like millions of Kirsten Dunst fans out there who've been clamoring for a movie from her to say, hey, go see her because it's totally worth the wait. It's not. So I don't know. It's not going to get a recommendation from me. Tim?
Yes, well, as you said, as my worked almost a decade and a half in journalism, and so I've seen my fair share of journalism-based movies. I did not expect this one to be one. And that's what it was. But the problem was, it's, like you said, it's retread. All other journalism movies have covered this before. On how if you're a certain type of journalist, like a war journalist, you get beaten down by it. You have to turn your emotions off in order to get the shot. Or write the story. And you end up being kind of a robot, but that's how you're good, because you can turn off your human emotions and get that shot. That's the scary shot or the intense shot that makes for a perfect newspaper cover or a Pulitzer Prize or whatever you want to call it. But that's been done so many times, and I've seen them all.
Yeah.
And I think the other problem with this movie is, like you said, it was marketed and made because of the climate.
Right.
That we're in here in 2024. But it didn't do any of it.
Yeah.
It's like it's like a bait and switch. Where, here, look at this movie. You could see something like this. This is like the extreme of what people thought might have happened on the January 6th.
Right.
But there's no politics in this movie. There's no reason for anything happening. There's no attempt to even give a reason why the sides fractured, why this is happening, what the president did. They drop some little things here and there, like, oh, it's his third term.
Yeah, the only throwaway line that I ever heard was he's in his third term.
Okay, so how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, like that. A lot has to happen to make that happen.
And then you hear the logic of Texas and California have united together, and it's like, so you have to, as the audience member, think, okay, those are two pretty huge states that control a lot of what this country does, so I can see how that would be a threat. But again, you're not given any of that.
Right.
And yet we're following journalists who are supposed to be covering that story, and you would think would talk about it, but they don't.
Right.
Because that wasn't the point of this movie. But the problem is, it was marketed as, can you believe it, America's fighting? What a movie that would be. That would be an interesting war movie.
Right.
This is not a war movie. This is a journalism movie with war as the backdrop. I think you said it perfectly, the backdrop.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it doesn't deliver on what it thinks it's delivering on. And all the tropes of this type of journalism movie are here and ready to happen. And like you said, you can see them coming a mile away.
Yeah.
And I think this was very disappointing. And I wasn't even all that hyped for it, but I was like, this could be intriguing. And I feel like A24 as a company who's put this out has earned enough of a reputation of, like, they usually take interesting risks or try something. But this one, to me, was all marketing hype that was not at all what this movie was about.
Yeah.
And to me, it's a big disappointment, and I also do not recommend it. There's so many much better journalism movies out there. And this director tried to do some interesting shooting techniques where he would sometimes cut the volume down and do just the picture taking as part of the storytelling, and that's kind of interesting. But again, other journalism movies have done that too.
Right.
And this was not as groundbreaking as he seemed to think it was. And so as a journalist, I didn't feel like this taught anybody anything about the profession that I know. Not that I was anything close to what these guys do, but I've certainly studied and read about it and done all that stuff over the years. And those are some crazy people who have to do that stuff. But it does take a certain level of emotions that you turn off. But I just feel like it can be told much better than this. So I definitely am disappointed. Matt?
Fair.
Yes. Well, so I came into this movie thinking, I think like you guys, that we were going to get... I was excited for this movie. I was really interested to see what was going to happen. And I was really interested to see kind of what are the political forces that have led to the state of
war.
This reality. Right? So it wasn't that.
No.
It wasn't that at all. But I think you guys missed a major point of the movie, which was...
Tell us.
This wasn't a journalism movie. This was a movie about war as hell.
Okay, yes. But okay, yeah.
And
journalism.
that's really all it's about.
Yeah, okay.
Is like, because the risks that were taken on like shock value scenes.
Sure.
There are several shocking scenes that you see in this movie.
Intense scenes. Yeah.
Intense scenes, yeah. And I think the movie is very shallow in that way, but I think that more than journalism and certainly way more than, hey, we've got a civil war brewing in America, is that no matter where the war is, and this is somewhat interesting in that it takes place in suburban America and urban America in some reality, but that war is just this hellish thing that horrible things can happen and routinely do. Yeah. And
but there's so many war movies that tell that story too better.
Sure, there are. But I think that if I have to say anything about this movie that's good, is that is a message that I received loud and clear. Mm-hmm. And I was very engrossed in this movie. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and I thought it was really gripping and compelling, which I get is different from what you guys experienced. But and was it paint by numbers and was it bad acting? I think it was those things. But I think at the end of the day, the story was enough for me to enjoy the movie, for me to have feelings about the movie, and for me to come out of it and say, I don't know if I liked that movie. I don't know if it was a good movie, but I definitely felt like my time was not wasted in watching the movie. And I would probably recommend that people see it for the sake of where we are in this country, and that people need to, I think about what different courses that we could take might lead to. And this is, I think, an allegory or that expresses one way that things could unfold. A realistic way, from a political standpoint, not really realistic at all. But I think just that as a society, we could be on a path that leads us to a place where horrible things could happen, and we could be in a setting that's a warlike setting. So I think a little bit different take than what you guys have, and I think I was more engrossed in this movie than you were. But overall, I would say my experience was a positive one.
Fair.
So, I think to expound on that, I may have came off negative there, and it was more of I was more disappointed in this movie than I was like, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I will admit the intense scenes were very intense, and I thought they shot those scenes really well. My only problem is as a movie, and I won't go into spoilers for that scene, but the way the scene develops in a movie structure is we have your main characters in peril, but two other characters who are inserted into the story just before that to basically be the fall guys for that scene, which was, you could see coming, to me, cut the tension in that scene, which could have been a really much more powerful scene if something more shocking happened. And I feel like this movie was always on the cusp of something, and then it went the predictable route instead. Despite some, good tension and good editing at times and good, sound design and all that kind of stuff. I thought it did that stuff pretty well. But to me, it was always just right on the cusp of having something interesting to say, and then it pulled back, or it went the safe route, like Todd said. And it just was like, I needed more. I came out of this movie more frustrated and disappointed than I was satisfied.
Yeah, well, sure. We disagree on that point. Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. Yeah.
I'll just say, the fundamental points of a movie, this is not a good movie. Does it have everything that you say? Sure. Does it have everything that we said? Also, sure. But
yeah, I think that's
as like a constructed movie of storytelling and stuff like that, not really.
Well, that's your opinion. I disagree with it.
I disagree with your disagreement.
That's fine.
Well, that makes sometimes that makes for a more fun podcast.
See, I thought that the story was the best constructed part of the movie.
Okay, interesting.
Because it kept my attention the whole time.
No, I get that.
Sure.
Part.
Like I was drawn in and sucked in the whole time. So for me, that has to be because of a good story.
Right. Or you're just going from shock factor to shock factor.
Well, okay. Maybe that's it.
But getting down to what we're here for, how many heart-shaped sunglasses would you give this movie?
Interesting choice.
Which is a choice of the less disturbing things I could have chose, probably.
Yeah.
0 being the worst, 0 being the worst because you got none, 5 being the best because then you got a lot of sunglasses you can share with your friends. If you still have friends. I don't know. We're heading towards a civil war.
Movie, maybe not.
Mm-hmm. Matt, how many heart-shaped sunglasses would you give this movie?
Well, I do like heart-shaped sunglasses. I'm going to go with 3 heart-shaped sunglasses out of 5 for this movie. I expect that to be the high score in the car today, but I came out of the movie, I was entertained, and I would say I was riveted to my seat during this movie. Now, was that because of a good story or a bad story or shock value? I don't know at this point.
That's your gut
reaction. But my reaction is
your gut reaction.
Yeah, right. My reaction is that
these are your sunglasses, Matt. Don't be ashamed about how many sunglasses you have.
I've got 3 sunglasses, and I stand by my 3 sunglasses, and I'll wear them all at once. And I would say that, if you watch the trailer and you were mildly interested in this movie, I think you could do worse than seeing it. So
fair.
That's what I'll say about that.
Tim?
Yeah, so as we've discussed, I am not as high on this movie, and I feel if you watch the trailer, you'll get let down if you think it's going to be what the trailer showed you. But that's not fair to just criticize this movie for, because there are plenty of trailers out there that don't show what the movie's actually about. But in my opinion, this did not live up to what I thought it was going to be. So I have it as a 2.
Well, and now I regret not doing 2-star American flags. Which in the movie I was like, that's going to be my rating.
Yeah,
I forgot until just right now.
That's all right.
We can change the rating, Todd.
That'd be the first time ever.
We have the power to
do it.
He's still
first
gonna
time ever.
Yeah.
We're changing it to
3 2-star American flags, which is a
gonna
total
have
of
2 of
6 stars.
I only need 2 of them.
And you have 4 total stars. It's complicated.
It's very complicated. Oddly enough, I'm right on the money with Tim. I started my review by saying like it's certainly not the worst movie, and it certainly has things going for it. It's like
we've seen
came
some
up
bad
short.
Movies. We've seen the bad movies.
Have we seen
this
some
is
bad
not,
movies?
This is not a bad movie.
Absolutely.
The intense scenes were intense, and I give them that.
Yeah, and I guess like taking to Matt's points, like if you don't need the extra details and stuff like that, I could see, absolutely. Like I know I'm a details person. I like to know how we got here.
For this one, yes, I
how I like, because basically with this movie, you're in the ending days of the Civil War, and you're not led up to how we got here, what's going on, but you're at the end of it, like you're at the finish line. So I guess it's pointing out that I'm much more of an overall race guy. Like I like to see the race. The ending of the race is exciting, but the end of the race is exciting to me because I saw the race. So
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
But yeah, I mean, like, you know, I would say if you saw the trailer and it piqued your interest at all, sure, go see it. I don't think you're going to walk out and go like, well, that was a waste of my $15 and I want my 2 hours back. But like, if you were like me and your initial thought was I could pass on that, then probably listen to your gut is what I would say. And that's me. And that's the rating. And that's the podcast.
And that's what
and
we
it's
do.
foggy and hot in here.
Yeah.
Yes. Well then,
on that note.
I thought it was interesting that you just said what you said about the details and that you're a details person. And I think that has borne itself out in our ratings over the time we've been doing this podcast. But also that I really like movies where they give you some and you have to fill in the gaps.
Sure.
I know, and I think we've talked about that before.
We have talked about that before. Like,
and I don't mind it too, because there's
Dune is a good example of that.
Right.
I really like Dune.
Yes, and it did have its moments of just here's this world, deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off, Tim. What were you saying?
No. I was gonna say a similar thing where like we've seen some movies where maybe they didn't tell you. Like what I loved about the first Quiet Places, they didn't really tell you much about what happened. You were just there.
Sure.
And that really worked for me because it was like, ooh, this is kind of cool.
And there's obviously movies that transcend that, like
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere at Once. Like,
Sure.
like what was that?
Oh,
We talked about that movie a lot in the sense of
Yes.
you're not given a whole lot, but at the end
We
of the
just run
day,
with
you
it.
don't need it.
We
Like,
just run with it.
like
Yeah.
the story was so engaging and so good, and the acting
Everything
was
was just
so
out there.
stellar
Yeah,
that like
yeah.
you don't need that stuff because all the underlying stuff fills that void.
Yeah. And I think that's where things can differ, and
And that's weird to analyze because you're a
Yeah.
stats guy. Like you're a
Yeah.
right. No,
You like
that
the
is
data.
interesting. Yeah.
I do like the data, but I also like pulling data together. And I think
Right, which involves you. Yeah, I get you. I get
me
what you're
filling
saying.
in some gaps in the data is okay with me, I guess.
Right.
Sure.
And I think in this case, yeah, we all had different expectations for this movie, and whether or not it met them.
I don't think it met anyone's expectations.
Well, no, it's
No,
very
no.
individual. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very individual.
I also have to admit that my movie experience was hindered by the fact that the women behind us audibly reacted to every single
big
thing in
moment,
the movie.
yeah.
Of like, oh my
Ooh,
god,
or
oh, that's sad. Like, I mean, it was like
were
every
definitely
single
involved.
scene had an audible response to it.
I mean, they were riveted by it. Obviously, maybe they'd never seen a movie like this before.
Yeah. Well, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies. We reviewed the movie Civil War, and we gave it an average rating of 2 1/3. 2-star flags out of 5, which I'm not going to even do the math on that. But I will tell you that that is not a great rating, and we would probably say don't go see this movie.
It's not a bad rating either.
No,
It's not a bad rating, but it's below
middle,
average.
Near average.
little below.
We would say don't go see this movie unless you've seen the trailer and you were like into it, intrigued. Then maybe you can. Or if you're one of the 3 or 4 Kirsten Dunst fan people out there, you could go see this movie.
How does our friend Ed feel about Kirsten Dunst? Would he see a Kirsten Dunst movie just
Because
because
she's
it
in it.
has Kirsten Dunst in it?
I'm not going to throw Ed under the bus here and give give what he would actually say. I'll save that for after the podcast. But I think he'd be happy to have her involved in the movie.
I will say, I would like to point out, since I feel like I've spent most of my time downplaying
Dumping
the
on her?
movie. I will, not her, no. She's earned everything I said about her tonight, I feel. But one of the aspects that I meant to mention I thought was a positive of this movie was some of the military operations you got to see. I haven't seen too many times. I mean, I know that there's war journalist movies out there, but I liked the interaction between the military and the press. And as you went through action
pretty cool.
scenes, just because I'm not a press guy, I don't know this stuff. I like seeing the relationship the military have with the press as far
They're
as
right
like
there. Yeah.
right up in it, protecting them, ordering where to go. Like I've just never seen too much of that, and that was a fascinating thing
And I
for me
thought
to
it
watch.
covered. I thought those scenes were actually really well done.
Yeah. I mean, I thought like those were the positives. I felt like of that was where I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
I've
The
just never seen
journalists
that.
are right in there with
Right.
with that stuff.
Great point. All right. Well, thank you for listening to this podcast, and please continue to download, subscribe, and listen to all episodes of Matt and Todd Go to the Movies, and we will see you next time.
Da 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 da
Da da
da da da.
da da da.